The city you're looking at is Paris. It just doesn't look like anything you were taught. In our world, the Mongols killed 40 million people. They reduced the population of some regions by 90%. And then, in April 1241, at the absolute peak of their western advance, they stopped. Not because anyone stopped them. Because a man on the other side of the world drank himself to death. Great Khan Ögedei's stroke triggered a succession crisis. Batu Khan's commanders rode home for the election. The Western campaign simply ended. But what if Ögedei doesn't die in 1241? What if the riders keep going? What if the Mongols finish what they started? Let's open the vault. To understand what almost happened to Europe, you need to understand what the Mongols actually were. They were not a medieval army. They were the most sophisticated military machine the world had yet produced. Their intelligence network preceded them by years. Their engineers, captured from China, Persia, and the Caliphate, could build siege engines capable of reducing any fortification on Earth. Their logistics supplied a mobile cavalry force across thousands of kilometers. They did not fight sieges of attrition. They calculated, surrounded, and obliterated. In 2 days in April 1241, the Mongols destroyed 2 separate European armies. At Legnica in Poland, they annihilated the combined forces of Poland, Germany, and the Teutonic Knights. 2 days later, at Mohi in Hungary, they destroyed the Hungarian Royal Army in a single afternoon. The 2 largest military powers in Central Europe ceased to exist as fighting forces. The road to Vienna, Paris, and Rome was open. Batu Khan's senior general Subutai had campaigned to the Adriatic coast. He had scouted France. He had reports on every European kingdom's military strength, from agents who had spent years in European courts, posing as merchants and clergy. He assessed the remaining European military capacity and sent back a single word to Karakorum: negligible. He was right. There was nothing left. The Holy Roman Empire's forces were scattered, demoralized, and commanded by Frederick II, who was too busy feuding with the Pope to organize a defense. France had no standing army capable of meeting the Mongols in the field. The Iberian kingdoms were exhausted from their own reconquista. In our timeline, a dying Khan in Mongolia sent a recall order, and the most capable military force in history obediently turned around and went home. In this timeline, Ögedei drinks 1 fewer cup of Irag on the night he died. He wakes up on April 10th with a headache instead of a stroke. The recall order never leaves Karakorum. Subutai's campaign does not pause. By midsummer 1241, the Mongol vanguard is in Bavaria. Subscribe to the Alternate Archive, a new timeline opens every week. The European conquests follow the Mongol template precisely. Cities that submit immediately are spared. Their artisans, scholars, engineers, and administrators are catalogued and transported east to serve the empire. Their populations become Mongol subjects, taxed and governed under the Yosa, the Mongol legal code. The cities themselves are often rebuilt on the same sites, according to the Mongolian preference for rational grid planning. Cities that resist are destroyed completely. Their populations are killed to the last person, as a demonstration to every other city watching. This is not cruelty for its own sake. It is the Mongol method of minimizing future resistance. It works with terrible efficiency. Cologne submits. It survives, transformed but alive. Its archbishop is taken east to serve as a religious advisor in Karakorum, where his theological arguments amuse the Khan, who tolerates all religions simultaneously. The cathedral is never finished in the Gothic style. It is eventually completed for centuries later in a hybrid Gothic Mongolian style that historians in this world call the Steppe Byzantine. France offers a different kind of resistance. Louis IX, St. Louis, one of the most capable kings France ever produced, attempts to organize a defensive coalition. He is diplomatically brilliant, personally brave, and militarily outclassed by a force that has already destroyed armies 5 times larger than anything he can field. The battle that destroys French military capacity takes 4 hours. The Mongols lose fewer than 200 men. Louis IX is captured alive. He is an interesting prisoner, educated, multilingual, evidently courageous. The Mongols had a policy of executing kings who resisted but respecting those who resisted with genuine military valor. Louis gets a trial before Batu Khan and is eventually released to govern France as a Mongol tributary vassal. His main function for the next decade is collecting the Mongol tribute and suppressing the occasional rebellion that the Mongols prefer not to deal with personally. The Iberian kingdoms give the Mongols more difficulty than anything since China. The Reconquista military tradition, 5 centuries of guerrilla warfare in rough terrain against a sophisticated enemy, produces soldiers and commanders who understand things about defensive warfare and terrain exploitation that the Polish and French knights did not. The Mongols spend 2 years and significant casualties on Iberia. They win. But they learn something in winning. The Iberian military tradition survives, absorbed into the Mongol army's Western command structure. Some of the tactics that Iberian commanders developed against the Mongols, coordination between infantry, cavalry, and artillery, use of terrain for enfilade, eventually make their way back east, improving the Mongol army in ways the conquered people never intended. By 1244, the Mongol Empire touches the Atlantic Ocean. Here is the thing about Mongol conquest that most popular history gets wrong. The killing was real. The destruction was real. The population of Eastern Europe fell by an estimated 30 to 40% in 2 decades of Mongol warfare. This is not a story that gets better by minimizing the catastrophe. Millions of real people died in genuine terror. Whatever follows must be understood in that context. But Mongol governance after conquest was, by the standards of the medieval world, structurally sophisticated. The Yosa, the Mongol legal code, guaranteed religious tolerance. All religions were protected, and the Mongols extracted tribute from all of them equally and played them against each other strategically. Christianity survives in the European territories. So does Islam, brought west by Muslim administrators from Persia and Central Asia. So does a revived paganism in the rural areas, where the church's authority is now undermined by an occupier who does not care about it. The census the Mongols conducted throughout conquered Europe was the most thorough enumeration of a population Europe had ever seen. Every artisan, every scholar, every engineer was identified, graded by skill, and assigned to the empire's needs. Europe's intellectuals, for the first time in history, were valued for what they knew rather than who their patron was. Roger Bacon, the English Franciscan who in our timeline invented the scientific method in isolation, in this timeline is transported to Karakoram at 32 years old. He works in a library that contains the accumulated knowledge of 3 separate intellectual traditions: Chinese natural philosophy, Islamic mathematics, and Greek science filtered through Baghdad, that he had never previously encountered. He also meets Al-Tusi, the Persian mathematician who had been similarly transported from the destroyed Abbasid Caliphate, and Guishojing, the Chinese astronomer. None of these 3 men were supposed to be in the same room. The synthesis they produce over the next 20 years, a unified framework of empirical observation, Islamic algebra, and Chinese engineering mathematics, is the foundation of what historians in this timeline call the Karakoram method. In our world, that synthesis took 3 more centuries to happen, in the Italian universities and the first scientific societies. Here it happens in captivity in the 1260s. The prisoners of the most violent empire in history accidentally invent modern science. The Mongol Empire always fragments. That is not a prophecy. It is an observed law of nomadic superempires. The very mobility that makes them unconquerable in expansion makes them ungovernable in stasis. By 1290, the Western European territories, governed by the successors of Batu Khan as the Western Khanate, are functionally independent of Karakorum. They are the wealthiest of the successor states, because they sit at the intersection of the old Silk Road trade network and the emerging Atlantic. They have been governing Christianized Europeans for 50 years. Their rulers speak French and Mongolian. Their children attend schools where Roger Bacon's successors teach the Karakorum method alongside traditional Mongol riding and archery. The feudal nobility is gone. Or rather, it has been transformed. The Mongols kept local lords as tribute collectors, but stripped them of military power. Private armies were illegal under the Yossa. Without military power, European nobility had to find other ways to remain useful. Many became administrators. Others became merchants, using the Mongol peace to build commercial networks that span the known world. The church is transformed more dramatically still. Without its political power, the Mongols separated church authority from civil governance with the same thoroughness they applied everywhere. The institutional church becomes genuinely what it had always claimed to be, a spiritual institution. Stripped of lands, stripped of armies, stripped of the ability to excommunicate kings, what remains is the theology and the pastoral network. This church produces different thinkers. Without the political stakes of heresy, theological experimentation is lower risk. The ideas that in our world got people burned at the stake, the heliocentric solar system, the infinity of the universe, the mortality of the soul, circulate in the Western Khanate universities by the 1330s, a full 2 centuries before they did in our Europe. There is no inquisition. The Mongols banned the killing of scholars as economically wasteful. But this intellectual freedom comes at a cost that is easy to miss. The collapse of centralized Mongol power in the 1340s is not a liberation. It is an opportunity for the most dangerous kind of person in the medieval world, a charismatic military commander with a sophisticated army, no institutional constraints, and a population that has forgotten what political stability feels like. The wars of Mongol succession in Europe, spanning roughly 1340 to 1420, are the most destructive conflicts on the continent since the original conquest. Former Mongol officers, trained in a military tradition that the Mongol Empire itself developed, fight each other across the ruins of kingdoms that no longer exist, for territories that have no prior political identity, with weapons and tactics that the Karakorum method made more effective. It is, in other words, a preview of what gunpowder warfare will look like 60 years early. So what does 2026 look like in this world? Europe doesn't exist as a concept. It never developed a shared cultural identity because it was never allowed to develop one. Mongol governance deliberately prevented regional solidarities from forming by mixing populations, administrators, and military units across ethnic lines. The thing that exists instead is the Eurasian Union, a federal parliamentary republic of 800 million people, ethnically complex, multilingual, legally descended from the Yossa, and culturally descended from a 700-year synthesis of steppe, Persian, Chinese, and Christian traditions. The concept of the nation-state never developed here. The Mongols actively suppressed ethnic nationalism because it was the one force that had historically produced the kind of sustained guerrilla resistance they found hardest to defeat. The political unit that emerged from Mongol governance, and survived its collapse, was the city-state and the trade zone, not the ethnic homeland. The Eurasian Union in 2026 is a polity of cities and regions, not nations. There was no World War I. There was no Holocaust. Both of those catastrophes required the specific fever of European ethnic nationalism, the nation-state's claim to ethnic homogeneity, and the racial ideology that weaponized it. Neither of those concepts developed in a civilization that had been governed by an empire that deliberately mixed populations for 7 centuries. Technology is ahead of our world in specific domains and behind it in others. The Karakoram method, that 13th century synthesis of Chinese, Persian, and European science, put this world approximately 150 years ahead of ours in materials science, chemistry, and astronomical calculation by the year 1500. They had the equivalent of our Industrial Revolution in the 1600s. Mechanized agriculture, steam power, industrial chemistry, all arrived earlier, driven by an empire that needed to manage logistics across the largest land territory in history. But computing arrived late. The specific mathematical tradition that produced Turing's work, English analytic philosophy, German formalism, the Vienna Circle, never developed in this world because England was a peripheral Atlantic backwater and Germany as a cultural entity doesn't exist. Computing was invented in the 1970s here, roughly 30 years behind our timeline, by researchers in the Sino-Mongol Republic working from different mathematical foundations. Their internet is younger than ours. Their smartphones are less capable. Their artificial intelligence is, by our standards, primitive. The Americas carry the most consequential divergence. The Mongol conquest of Europe did not immediately reach across the Atlantic. But the Pax Mongolica's trade network, the most efficient in history, connected the Eurasian landmass so thoroughly that rumors of Western lands reached Mongol administrators in former France within 50 years of the conquest. The first intentional Mongol-backed Atlantic expedition left what was once Lisbon in 1312. They arrived with trade goods, horses, and the Karakoram method's approach to disease, an empirical practice of quarantine developed from Chinese medical knowledge that was far ahead of European medical theory. Contact with the Americas was still catastrophic for indigenous populations. The Karakoram quarantine protocols reduced the disease mortality significantly, perhaps 30%, rather than the 90% out of our timeline. Significant nations survived. The Aztec Triple Alliance negotiated rather than being conquered outright. The Inca negotiated a trade treaty with the Eurasian Union in 1389 that is still cited in alternate world international law. The Americas in 2026 are more populous, more politically autonomous, and more technologically developed than in our world. There are three major indigenous nation-states, the Aztec Federation, the Andean Republic, and the Mississippian Confederation, that are full members of the World Trade Council. The Atlantic slave trade never happened because the Eurasian Union's agricultural system ran on mechanized labor, not enslaved people. One cost the alternate world carries that is harder to see. The foundation of this world is mass death. 40 million people. Whole civilizations erased. Centuries of accumulated European and Central Asian culture destroyed in a generation. The Eurasian Union is sophisticated enough to acknowledge this. Its founding myth is not a story of glory. It is a story of survival and synthesis. The word in the administrative language for what happened is roughly translated as the burning through, not a conquest but a cauterization, the removal of a structure by the most violent means possible, followed by the growth of something new in the scar tissue. Whether what grew was worth what was lost, this world has been debating for 8 centuries. It has not reached consensus. It may not be the kind of question that has an answer. The Mongols were, by any honest accounting, the most destructive force in the history of the pre-modern world. The body count is real. The terror was real. The civilizations they erased cannot be recovered or compensated. But here is what this thought experiment asks you to sit with. The Europe that survived Ögedei's death went on to produce democracy, the scientific method, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also the Holocaust, the transatlantic slave trade, and 2 world wars that killed 100 million people. The Europe that Mongols built, in this vault, in this alternate timeline, produced none of the highest achievements and none of the deepest atrocities. It produced different ones instead. No civilization escapes the cost of being a civilization. Every system of order, however it was founded, eventually produces both wonders and horrors in proportion to its power. The Mongols built a world without European nationalism. It was also a world built on 40 million dead. The question isn't which world was better. The question is, what does it tell us about our own that the thing that saved it was one man's cardiovascular system? Tell me what you think in the comments. Until the vault opens again, subscribe to the Alternate Archive.